يا طالب العلم قم لا تنم فإن الزمان يا طالب العلم قم لا تنم فإن الزمان انقضى وانصرم.
والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم وفقنا من الأقوال والأعمال لما تحبه وترضى. This is not going to be a lecture. It's going to be more of an addressing, inshallah ta'ala. I'm not going to necessarily speak too much about my journey or myself, but I'm going to speak more about some of the things that I had seen, the time that I was in Somalia, some of the benefits, some of the things that I had recognized, and that we, inshallah ta'ala, can perhaps benefit in the UK, and perhaps, I wouldn't say implement necessarily, but just for us to really see where we're at, inshallah ta'ala. I divided it into 10 points. Inshallah ta'ala. The first one is, when I went to Somaliland, and I want to say Somaliland from now on, not Somalia, inshallah ta'ala. When I went to Somaliland, one of the first things that I had recognized were the ages of the mashayikh. Now when I went there, of course I was really anticipating it, / expecting it, but I was a bit bewildered, if you want to say, when I saw the hierarchy. Why do I say that? In the UK you have people like me that might be teaching certain classes, right? Very young in age, very young in knowledge. But when I went to Somaliland, the program that I was on was run 5 times a week, 5 days a week. And it would be in the morning from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. There's 600 students that come from all around the world. These 600 students, they need admin. They need someone to run the program. They need someone to take attendance. They need someone to take registrations, exams, everything else. One thing I realized was that admin, those that are doing the running around, those that are doing the absence, taking the registers and everything else, their ages were 34, 29, 32, 37. Normally here in the UK, we send the young ones, right? La. These people were not just in terms of age, however, when it comes to their knowledge, they were very, 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 very strong students of knowledge. Perhaps mashayikh. As an example, one day, one of the teachers didn't make it because he got in a car crash in the morning. And as he's coming, he tells the admin, he says, look, I'm not going to make it. One of the admin, who was 32 years of age, the exact book that Sheikh was teaching, the exact lesson, the exact pages, he taught it from memory, with absolutely zero preparation. And this is who? It's not the Sheikh. This is the person behind the scenes who's running around. The ages generally of the mashayikh that I recall, Sheikh Abdulahad, for example, who is known as the grammarian of Hargeisa, Somaliland, who graduated from the Islamic University as the first cohort, 78 years of age. He was teaching Al-Fiqh ibn Malik for 48 years of his life. 48 years of his life. We also have Sheikh Ali Warsame, rahimahullah ta'ala, who passed away last year. May Allah have mercy upon him. 83 years of age. We have Abdullah Barbarawi, 54. Sheikh Ahmed Eid, 56. Sheikh Abdul Karim Hassan Hash, 50 plus. So the first thing ala kulli hal that I recognized were the ages of the mashayikh. The ages of those that were teaching. Am I having a go at those that are teaching in the UK? La, I'm not. Perhaps age and knowledge is not the same anyway. Someone can be young and teaching and be very knowledgeable. But that's the first thing that I recognized in Somaliland when I had seen the demographics of the teachers. The second thing that I recognized was that the scholars, the mashayikh that I had come across, they were all well grounded from a young age. When it comes to Islamic sciences and knowledge and talab al-ilm, from a very young age they were very well grounded. Some examples, we have for example Sheikh Hassan Ali Warsame, who has a PhD from the Islamic University of Medina in the science of hadith. There's a beautiful story. He went to the Islamic University of Medina having memorized Al-Fiqh ibn Malik, which is 1,000 lines of poetry. Very difficult, tongue twister. But there's a funny story which is narrated from someone else, but it's very famous. The majority of Somalis within that area, they know about it. Sheikh Sharif Tawil came to Bur'a, which is where he's from. Sheikh Hassan Ali Warsame, he's from Bur'a, specific city. Sheikh Sharif Tawil, who is the Arabist, if you want to say, of the Somali scholars. Not just that, I believe perhaps in many other lands he's the most knowledgeable when it comes to the Arabic sciences. Sheikh Sharif Tawil lives in Kenya. He came and visited Bur'a for 3 months for a Dawrah. When he came, he has a qaida. Anyone who wants to master grammar, they have to memorize Al-Fiqh al-Malik. And if they don't, they will never reach that level, ever. And when they memorize it, they need to be doing revision of it. They have to practice it. They need to do sub'is or sub'a, however you want to call it, on a weekly basis. And it has to be like Fatiha, like their food and drink. So whenever he goes to a city, so he can make sure he revises the hifz of it, he would ask and say, who in the city, find me someone young, because someone young normally has time. Find me a young boy who's memorized Al-Fiqh al-Malik, so I can practice with him. So Hassan Ali Warsame, who's now of course a PhD student, he's 13 years of age, running around the masjid. His father is the great scholar that passed away last year, Sheikh Ali Warsame, hafidhahullah ta'ala wa rahimahullah. Sheikh Sharif Tawil said, are you Sheikh Ali's son? He said, yes, I am. He said, you memorize Al-Fiqh al-Malik, right? He said, yeah, but wallahi Sheikh, he's a bit weak. I don't know if I can say I've memorized. He said, don't worry, come. It was before Salat al-Maghrib. He sat down and they began reading one line. Sheikh Ali Warsame, Sheikh Hassan Ali Warsame, he says, I knew the poem up to the 300th line perfectly. But the moment I get to the 300th line, what happens? I start to shake a bit. As he's starting to get to the 300th line, he says, Salatul Isha. Adhan went off. After the Salah, the Shaykh came to say, quick, we have around 40 minutes left. You normally finish around an hour, 20 minutes. Come, let's finish it. And then young Hassan Ali Warsame, he says, no, Shaykh, wallahi, my mom is waiting for me. And I have to go home because after Isha, and very far away. He was trying to escape, reading the remaining 700 or so. He said, okay, khalas. What you need to do is come Fajr Salah and we'll read it together then. So he said, that night I never went to sleep. He's 13 years of age. I didn't go to sleep, he said. I was revising. He said, I came in the morning and alhamdulillah I read it with ease. But he said for those 3 months, he said, every single Salatul Fajr come to me and we're going to read it together. Sheikh Hassan Ali Warsame, after 3 months, the Sheikh went back. 6 years later, he gets accepted to the Islamic University of Medina. Why has he got memorized? This is from the things he's got memorized, Al-Fiqh al-Malik. And before they go out of their city, they know their stuff. They know, they're very well grounded. What happened was, he says, the university announced that there's going to be a competition for anyone who's memorized Al-Fiqh al-Malik. They're going to be given a grand prize. So he goes to sign himself up. 17 years of age, young boy. He sees Mauritanians that are 34, 36, 32, 29 that are in the line signing up. He looked at him. He said, how old are you? He said, I'm 17 years of age. Where are you from? Somalia. He said, come on, we're from Mauritania. You know, we're known for hifz. Ala kulli hal, fast forward. He took part in the competition and he got second. He got 99%. The only student that beat him was a student from India who got 100%. So that's an example. Another example is Sheikh Dr. Hussein Fara'id. The word Fara'id means inheritance. His name is Sheikh Dr. Hussein Inheritance. There's a science in Islam which is called science of inheritance. I done a bit of research. I asked her, I said, why did they call him this? Because he was in Medina for 16 years. He done a degree, and then he done the masters, and then a PhD. But in which science? Not Fara'id. He done it in Hadith. In our program, he was teaching a silsila in Hadith. So I said, where did this name come from? He said when he was young, 14 years of age, people used to go to him to ask him inheritance questions. And he was a master in inheritance at the age of 14. That's another example. Generally, ala kulli hal, we also have Dr. Muhammad Atur al-Khashi'i. He's 37 years of age, very young. Like, he's an alim in his field. He has a book which he started to write at the age of 16. It's called Ruh al-I'rab. It's 2 mujallad. He uses that as his reference point when it comes to grammar. Age of 16 he began writing that. So ala kulli hal, the second thing that I saw was the mashayikh, the scholars. They were very well grounded when it comes to Islamic sciences from a young age. We also have Sheikh Abdullah Barbarawi at the age of 16. He was sent to the Badia. When people normally go to the Badia, what are they sent for? The Prophet ﷺ, he was sent to Badia, right? For what? Perfect the speaking, learn the culture, etc. Sah. He was sent to the Badia to teach Aqidah and Tawheed. Sulam al-Wusul, which is around 500 lines of poetry, which summarizes around 6 or 7 books in Tawheed and Aqidah, which is normally the Alfiyah, if you want to say, not so, but it's normally the Alfiyah, the summary of the science of Aqidah. He was sent to the Badia so he can teach Sulam al-Wusul at the age of 16. So that's the second thing, ala kulli hal. I quickly want to touch upon the study style, the style of study in Somaliland, Hargeisa, but generally in Somalia. It's not the academic way. They teach in the classical way. They'll take a science and they'll teach that science from the beginning, 0, and they will go up 5, 6 books until they get to the advanced level of that science. And you do that for every single science. It's not like the universities. The universities, they will take a portion of what? They'll take a portion of different books and they make it into a university book. We'll come on to later which one is better, inshallah ta'ala. Another thing that I saw with regards to the study style is the students studying amongst themselves was more beneficial than the teacher's lesson. This is something which I own, because now I'm studying somewhere else. And I do not see this anywhere else except Somalia. Well, because of course I mean Somalia in general, but where I went to. Students, in the morning you have classes 7 to 1, the teacher's teaching. Afterwards what happens? In the evening you're free, there's no more classes. You go inside the masjid and you see every single corner is halaqat. The students are in circles and they're studying between themselves. How do they do it? There's 7 or 8 students. Each student, he teaches that which was taught today. Then the next student teaches it, next student teaches it, next student. By the time you get to the end student, you've heard it 7 times and you've taught it once as well. And this is when? The day you studied it. Another thing, the study style, why it's quite unique in Somaliland, or generally Africa, shall I say, is there's something called interrogation days. An example was, you have a science, specifically us, you remember, you have a science, that science you have a teacher assigned for it. And one day of the week, a selected amount of students, because there's 600 students altogether, a selected amount of students are picked randomly. And they're told, come to this place at this time, any day of the week. And what happens is that teacher, he's going to ask questions. He's only going to ask things about wherever he taught. So for example, on a Thursday evening, we're always expecting this. You get called to the Sheikh's office, there's 10 students there, he says, I want us to debate, or should I say discuss, the matter that I told you guys the other day about Asma al-Sifat, for example. And the Sheikh asks you questions, this person replies, they say, why do you think he's right? It's interrogation ala kulli hal. That was another thing that I saw. One more thing that I saw, inshallah ta'ala, which was incredibly emotional to say the least, was a statement that I had written down, because as I was there, I was writing down certain things that I want to take back from my time there. One of the things that I wrote down was that when you see the mashayikh and the scholars, you genuinely see that knowledge is not pure content regurgitation, but rather a means to become a better human being with Allah, with His creation, and with yourself. What are some examples? When I went there, my mother wasn't feeling too well, but she wasn't feeling enough for me to not go. Also, we had family. I have brothers and everything else who were there as well, but she was not in critical condition. So I went and traveled. About 1.5 years in, my mother got a bit more sick. But now it got to a stage where I had to come back. There's around 4 months, 5 months left. I made the decision already to go back. But I said to myself, let me see what the mashayikh say, just to have an idea of what their opinion is. So I went to one of them, and I told him, I said, my mother's not feeling too well, I feel like going back. I already made the decision, I'm already going back. But I just wanted to see what he says. He said, Abdulahad, if I see you in the next 2 days roaming around Hargeisa, I swear by Allah, I will speak to the authorities and make sure you're in prison. I said, what do you mean? What happened? He said, your mother. Many of us perhaps would have thought knowledge might be more virtuous. Seeking knowledge is the best thing someone can do after the obligatory acts. I am on a road, 1.5 years, I've been here now. He said, Wallahi, if we see you again, you're going to put you into prison. Is that just a joke? We know Somalia generally isn't like the UK. It's all about who you know. You just speak to certain people and they'll get things done. There's no court you want to go to, fight your case or anything like that. I told him, Sheikh, I was going to go anyway, but I just wanted to know. That was an example, ala kulli hal, of the implementation of your knowledge. So for you to become a better human being. Many of us are married, many of us have children, many of us have friends. You might know something in Islam, but where is our implementation? I'll give you an example. Sheikh Muhammad Rashid Iga, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he's one of the senior students of Imam Muqbil. Imam Muqbil, he has a biography of himself, autobiography. In the beginning, he writes down his distinguished students. He writes on that, Muhammad Rashid Iga, Mufidun fil Aqeedah wal Hadith. He's, mashallah, tabarakallah. You will see him once a week. He's made it a ritual. He said, I can't leave this off. He would go and visit someone sick in a hospital. Guaranteed. If he has a lesson, he'll make sure it's not in that time. Another example is Sheikh Muhammad Hussein Jama. He would have a schedule throughout the week where he would go and visit the graves. How many of us know of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, كُنْتُ نَهِيتُكُمْ عَنْ زِيَارَةِ الْقُبُورِ, I used to prohibit you from visiting the graves. But however, now he said, فَزُورُوهَا, visit the graves. Before it was haram. Now I command you to go and do so. Why? فَإِنَّهَا تُذَكِّرُ الْآخِرَةِ وَتُزَهِّدُ فِي الدُّنْيَا. It's going to remind you of the hereafter, and it's going to make you someone who's aesthetic and distanced away from the dunya. Who's heard of this hadith? Put your hand up. Okay, how many people? Let's be honest. Because the message I want to get across today, the main message is that we must be a people who do not focus ever so much purely and merely on content regurgitation. We need to be a people who change. Our actions need to change. You have hatred, animosity to your brothers. You shouldn't be like this as a Muslim. We know sick people, our families, our friends, our relationships with people, ourselves. How many people, just as an experiment, how many people visited a sick person in a hospital, Muslim or not Muslim, over the past week? And it cannot be family that you was told, we're going to visit them, come. Just as a normal ritual, random, I just want to go and visit someone. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, it's fine by the way. I'm just trying to get to that point. 2 months, 3 months, I'll stop there. But the number of people who knew were different. Likewise, how many people have also heard about the hadith where the best to eat is thuluth, thuluth, thuluth? You should have a third for food, a third for... How many implemented? Rather, I'm speaking about myself as well. But when I went and I saw the mashayikh and the scholars and the manifestation of that which they learn and they study, it was something completely different. Sheikh Ahmed Eid, for the past 14 years, he has a ritual where he would go to the blessed lands, Mecca specifically, for the entire month of Ramadan. For the entire month of Ramadan. The first year which he did was this year. When I inquired to find out why, it was because his mother's not feeling too well. And we know the virtue of our mothers. How many people would rather spend time with their friends than their mothers, for example? This is not from Islam. And this is something which I had seen with the mashayikh. The fifth point, inshallah ta'ala, is the length and the extent that Somali scholars went to seek knowledge. There's a book which is called Safahat min Sabr al-Ulama. When I heard some of the things that the mashayikh went through to seek knowledge, it told me two things. Number one, we have done nothing. And number two, it reminded me of some of the things that are in that book. How some of our pious predecessors, the lengths they went for knowledge and sacrifices and everything else. As an example, Shaykh Abdullah Barbarawi, he was assigned to teach Aqidah/Tawheed. So he had a silsila, 13 books that he's going to teach over the course of 2 years. He comes at a certain time, teaches, and then goes. When you go to the book Al-Aqidatul Wasitiyah, there was a few students who do not have the book. And their reason was quite valid. They said there was not enough. I mean, they finished. They went to every bookstore, they genuinely can't find the book. And he said, if you guys were genuinely serious, you would have done something that we done in Damaj, Yemen. And he said specifically Al-Aqidatul Wasitiyah, when his teacher began to teach the book, the prints were finished. It could not be accessed in Yemen. No one could find them anymore. Very same situation. He said the students had to come together and they word for word, letter for letter, haraka for haraka, wrote the book out using the books that students had. And they had a written version with their hands. No printers, nothing like that. They wrote it out word for word. Another example was the way they actually traveled. Sheikh Ahmed Eid and Sheikh Abdullah Barbarawi, they went together at the same time to Damaj, Yemen. And he mentioned the way they started to go and how they went by boat. And they had provisions. The journey was 4 days, but the provisions they had were only enough for 1 day in terms of food and drink. And the thing that they would fear the most is the actual traveling, being in the middle of the sea, not knowing the directions they're going. They don't have a specific captain that's... So the extent ala kulli hal that the mashayikh went for knowledge was the fifth thing, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to touch upon. Or I have touched upon. In fact, the students themselves, the students that are on this program, they came from various different places. 600 students in total. Some came from, or certain students that I had discussions with, and in fact were known amongst the people. There was 2 students who came from Jigjiga, which is in Ethiopia. By car, it's around 3-hour drive. Where's 3 hours? Liverpool? 3 hours? Manchester? 3-hour drive. Let's just say Manchester or Liverpool. Allah is my witness. These 2 boys, they came by foot because they didn't have money. So even the mentality of the students, the way the students are, in terms of time, in terms of traveling, in terms of being patient with knowledge, it was something very, very different. The next point, inshallah ta'ala, 6th point is a benefit I saw of living in a Muslim country. I'm not going to go into the politics of where is a Muslim country and where is not, because a lot of that is politics now. But living in a Muslim country where the symbols of Islam are openly addressed and openly seen, I've been to many Muslim countries. But when I went to Somaliland specifically, I said to myself, this is somewhere that I would want my children to grow up. I'm not saying this for Somalia, by the way. I'm saying this for any Muslim country. If you're from Algeria, Morocco, wherever you're from, I genuinely saw and I said to myself, if this is what Hijrah would be like, Allahumma barik. And the day I realized that was a day where we had an evening class. We had the evening dars. And normally on the way back home, I would have to walk through the Oxford Circus of Somaliland. It's the Souq, right in the middle. because that's the route that my home is. As I'm going, walking, I would walk home normally. It's around 8 p.m. in the night. Before I left, however, just as a side point, because it's linked to this, before I left, what are some of the reasons why someone might have discouraged me going to Somalia? Suggestions? Safety. Safety. We all heard of Al-Shabaab, right? I was hearing a lot, you're going to Somalia, what's wrong with you? Al-Shabaab is there, they're going to do this to you, they're going to do that to you, you might not come back here, you're safe, etc., etc. Where I was going to, of course, alhamdulillah, I was quite safe anyway, but this was always in the back of my mind. So one day as I'm going back home from the evening dars, I hear sirens, number one. And I see everyone, this is Oxford Circus, like 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. completely packed out. I suddenly see everyone running in one direction. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Everyone's saying, so run, qabta, catch him. So what do I have in the back of my mind? Have they entered the city? Because this is the only thing that I perhaps could have thought in terms of safety, because that's all I heard. So what did I do? I said, let me follow the crowd. I started running as well. As I'm running, one direction, sirens, whole heap, 10, 15,000 people running. What happened after that? I saw what everybody was running for. So now everyone stopped, and they're saying, stop her, catch her, put her inside that room. Where's the police? It's a woman who was basically dressed inappropriately. As in no hijab, she had a skirt on, her chest was showing, and it was a way which was haram ala kulli hal. The next day is when I said, wow, subhanallah. Every single masjid in Hargeisa, the khutbah was about tabarruj and covering up. Every single khutbah in the entire city. On the news, breaking news, a woman was seen in the souq, running, dressed inappropriately. What has happened to our country, etc. On the news. That's when I said, subhanallah. Even when you look at implementation of the deen generally, yes, you'll see there are certain things that are not correct. But when you look up, and in fact the government also supporting that, it's a completely different case. Likewise, the mashayikh then being able to openly speak about haram. Here we have LGBT that you can't say a word about, unless you quote the book, right? There was a time, what happened was, and I'm going to stop here and continue after, inshallah. There was a time where, again, it made it on the news. There were 3 boys or something like that that got caught, not necessarily doing the act, but they were promoting it. They were taken into prison. They got a sentence, I can't remember, like 7, 8 years. They got some sentence ala kulli hal. Again, every single khutbah that week was about LGBT or homosexuality, shall I say. And the way the mashayikh are speaking, they should be destroyed like the people of Lot were destroyed. This sentence is not enough for them. And this is open. Another thing I saw was that the mashayikh would openly and advise those that are above them in terms of the leaders and those that are in control. Ala kulli hal, implementation of knowledge. Implementing knowledge. Seeing the lands of Somaliland and the mashayikh and the scholars there, one thing that I had come across is that the mashayikh truly implement, from what I've seen ala kulli hal, that which they learn. And the whole mindset of implementation rather than just taking in knowledge was extremely evident once again. An example again is the masjid that I used to pray in, and in my local masjid, was the masjid in which Sheikh Ahmed Eid, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he would also pray in. And Salatul Jum'ah is something I recognized, but I only recognized over the course of 2 months. Because he would do this regularly, and then I asked and inquired what I realized basically. And that was the fact that after every single Salatul Fajr, he would leave after he does his adhkar, etc. But Yawmul Jum'ah, I recognized on a regular basis, he would finish the Salatul Fajr, And then people stay around 10-15 minutes. And then what I will do is go home. I'll get ready, shower, breakfast, etc. Yawm al-Jum'ah, right? So what's next? Salatul Jum'ah is coming. I would come back and he would be sitting at the exact same seat, in the exact same way, doing the exact same thing. And for me it was a bit strange because everyone else has left and they've come back. He's also wearing the exact same clothes. So it indicated for me that he didn't necessarily go home. 1 month goes by, 2 months goes by, and I always see him in the same seat. So once 2 months went by, I asked him and I said, Sheikh, I recognize that you're always here whenever I leave and come back for Salatul Jum'ah. You're there still in the same place. Could you tell me your routine? Do you go home later? How comes basically? What's going on? And he told me, Abdulahad, the angels, they stand at the doors on Yawm al-Jum'ah waiting for the attendees of the Salah. And they scribe, they write down those who come in chronological order. So in the hope of me being from the first, I keep my seat and I basically stay there until Salatul Jum'ah. How many of us knew of that hadith? Quite a lot. So this was another example. It was something I said to myself, and it's not mere speech. It's not mere, it's something that they learn. Likewise, he would also spend Asr to Maghrib in the same masjid every single Friday. Which of course is an obvious reason why he would do that. So that was generally an example an example of the implementation of knowledge that the Mashayikh that I had come across also. Likewise, the lessons, it would start, as I said, 7 to 1, and finish at 1. The Mashayikh would have water placed in front of them before every lesson. One thing I recognized again, there were certain days that he wouldn't sip. He wouldn't take a sip. And it was evident and obvious, in fact, that other days he would drink them. Over 2-3 months again, I would recognize and see that it's the Mondays and Thursdays that he's consistently not drinking. And again, after some investigation, if you want to say, the reason is of course obvious. The next point, inshallah ta'ala, is a statement which I've written. As I told you guys, I collected a few things, few statements, few things that I can take or gems that I can remember some of the things for. One of the things that I had taken as a statement to take back home was that ulama have khashya, not khawf. And nobody said that to me, by the way. Nobody said to me, Abdulahad, you know the scholars here, they have khashya, no khawf. I just saw that. In fact, I didn't hear the word. But from their actions, I saw an actual real life practicalization of it. And a lot of it would come with tears. And a lot of the times I said to myself, you don't really find this too much in the UK. The reason why, Allahu A'lam. As an example, Sheikh Ahmed Eid, as an example, normally he's known as Kathir al-Bukat, one who cries constantly. Whenever he remembers Allah, he's spoken to about Allah, the day of resurrection, and it wouldn't be something strange for him to begin to cry. An example was, the Shaykh who was explaining the verse in the tafsir part, so he teaches tafsir part of the program, he does the tafsir of the Quran in those 2 years. It's the basic Laqbayn version of it, Ma'ani Mufradat al-Quran, and likewise, or Kalimat al-Quran, and likewise, Hidayat al-Ayat, and then like a small summary. He got to the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he said, in Surah Ar-Rahman, فيهما عينان تجريان. And in Tafsir al-Jalalain, there's a fa'idah which he brought. The fa'idah says, in English first of all, inside Jannah there are aynan, not eyes, springs. The word ayn means spring in Arabic. The reason why the eye was called a spring, because the eye also flows with tears. Inside Jannah there will be 2 springs, aynani tajriyan, that are flowing. Water, drink, wine. And the Shaykh, he brought the fa'idah, he said the reason why the believers will enter a Jannah, and Allah put in the Jannah 2 springs that will be flowing, is because they had 2 eyes that used to flow with water and tears in the dunya, because of the fear of Allah. And the Shaykh began to cry and cry and cry and cry, and he stopped the lesson there because he couldn't continue. He normally finishes the surah, he does around 2.5 pages per lesson. That ayah, as you know, is on the second/third page, towards the middle/top. So he still had some to teach, but he could not do so, so he stopped. Another example is a beautiful example with Sheikh Dr. Hussein al-Fara'id. He was teaching I'tiqad Sufyan al-Thawri, which is a risala that Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri, who died 183, he wrote to his student Shu'aib ibn Harb. Why did he write to him? Shu'aib ibn Harb, who's a student of Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri, he said to him, he said, "Oh my teacher, teach me something, tell me something, hadithni bi hadith, tell me something in Islam that will benefit me when I stand before Allah on the day of resurrection." Who's saying this to who? Who's saying this to who? The student is saying this to? The teacher. Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri, he begins to write. The risala is around 4 or 5 pages. It's very short. In a nutshell, what he speaks about in the risala is the main tenets of faith, aqidah, and manhaj. And he mentions 1 or 2 fiqh matters to do with Mas'al al-Khufayn, which he links to manhaj and aqidah. But in a nutshell, he speaks about some important things. He speaks about bid'ah, manhaj, he speaks about aqidah, the asma of Allah and his sifat. And then at the end, as Sheikh Dr. Hussein Fara'id is teaching this, he gets to the end of the risala. And I'm going to read the end, the part that made the Sheikh cry. The Sheikh began to cry. And it wasn't normal tears. And he started to weep and weep and weep and weep. And the reason he was weeping is, his point was, our deen is so protected that what Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri, who was from the Salaf, what he said from his mouth, not just that, but listen to what he said. We have it here with us clear. Look what he said that made the Shaykh cry. He said, يا شعيب بن حرب إذا وقفت بين يدي الله عز وجل فسألك عن هذا الحديث فقل يا رب حدثني بهذا الحديث سفيان بن سعيد الثوري ثم خلي بيني وبين ربي عز وجل وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. Subhanallah. He said to his student when he finished the risala, he said, "Oh Shu'aib ibn Harb, when you stand before Allah on the day of resurrection and He interrogates you and asks you, who taught you this? Where did you get this from? This knowledge of what's in the risala, who told you it?" He said, "Tell your Lord and my Lord that Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri was the one who told me it, and I followed him in it. And then خلي بيني وبين ربي, then leave the matter for me and my Lord. Let Allah come to me after that." Why did the Shaykh cry? What was it that made him weep? He realized and said, look at the yaqeen Sufyan ibn Sa'id al-Thawri has about Allah and his religion. Look at the yaqeen he has that which he's transmitting to Shu'aib ibn Harb is 100% factual. That he's ready to stand before Allah on the day of resurrection and be interrogated. And if he's wrong, be thrown into the hellfire. He said, my brothers and sisters, we have that exactly with us. That clean aqidah, that clean manhaj, we have it here with us today. How did his risala come to us in Hargeisa X amount of years later? That's when he began to weep. So ala kulli hal, that was the other example that really made me think, subhanallah, scholars have khashya. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. The only people that truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through knowledge, and they are conscious of Allah and the hereafter, the day of resurrection, and where they're going to end up, it truly is the scholars. 2 more points inshaAllah ta'ala, as I've been told the time is running out. The next point I realized was that the scholars, for them, knowledge never stops. And we hear this a lot, right? Knowledge never stops. From the cradle to the grave. They don't need to say that. Just from them, from what you see about them, you realize. As an example, one of the mashayikh, he's only started to study qira'at now, at the age of 56. Look, he's giving durus. He's a alim in his field for his own rights. But what's he doing now? He finds a Yemeni scholar who's come to the country. He's going to learn under him qira'at. For us in the UK, unfortunately, we see knowledge as what? Not, of course, everyone. It's not good to paint everyone with the same brush. But the majority of the people, I'm going to do these books, and then what's next? Alhamdulillah, I've reached. What book is... When are we going to finish? What book is next? And then are we done? La, that's not how it is. Another example is one of the mashayikh. In fact, this is something I saw with my own eyes. There's a sheikh from the UK. He wouldn't want me to mention his name, so I won't mention his name. He, mashallah, tabarakallah, he's very well grounded when it comes to Islamic sciences. Very well grounded. But he's younger than these scholars. He's younger than them, number one. But his knowledge, Allahumma barik. But he also has 4 PhDs in different sciences and 8 masters in secular studies. All secular studies. But when he was younger, he studied in Ethiopia with the scholars over there. He didn't study the academic way in terms of Islamic studies. He just studied. He memorized when he was young. He's, Allahumma barik, very well grounded. He made hijrah to Hargeisa. When he went there, a lot of the people that were there, they heard that he came there and he's moved here now, etc., etc. The mashayikh that I was studying with, who I've been speaking about all of this time, they decided, look, there might be a field that we need to touch upon. Because maybe they haven't been exposed to it a lot. Because if you look into the African side of the world, when it comes to feminism, secularism, atheism, all of these isms and Western ideologies, they're not ever so exposed to it. So what happened? They said, we know the Shaykh, we know his credentials, we know he's upon the Sunnah, Allahumma barik, we know his knowledge of Islam, we can trust him, but he's also an expert in these secular studies. So what did they do? They got him together. This is wallahi subhanallah. They got him together. They said, teach us. I'm rephrasing, and I'm not going to mention the book, but they said, teach us a book in philosophy and specifically atheism. So what would they do? Us as the students, we're coming in at what time? 7 a.m. to the masjid. When we're coming in, we would see the mashayikh that are sitting in this class, and then they get up, they would sit on the chair and we would sit on the floor. The point I'm trying to get to is, for them, knowledge never stops. For them, knowledge doesn't have an end. For them, knowledge is not something that comes to an end. The second last point, inshallah ta'ala, is, this isn't perhaps specific, shall I say, to the scholars in Somalia. I'm assuming it's, all scholars are like this. But from one of the things that I saw was the in-depth, how in-depth, and diqqatul fahm, and the intricate details that they have on the back of their hands. As an example, one day I was traveling with one of the mashayikh, Sheikh Ahmadi, who teaches tafsir. As I said to you guys, he was teaching tafsir the whole time. And generally he teaches tafsir in 6 masajid in Hargeisa, 7 days a week. He said himself that he sacrificed the rest of his life to just teach the book of Allah and the meanings of it. And Allahumma barik, he's known for that science, etc. So one day I asked him a question. This said to me, subhanAllah, it was an example of how precise when it comes to the knowledge. This is an example, as I said, this is not only for Somalia, I'm assuming, but it's one of the things that I had come across. There was an ayah in the Quran that I asked him about because I didn't understand something about it. Because there was ishkal. And the way he answered it so fast, and he literally said, no, it's this. I was just like, subhanallah. We might not necessarily see it as something big, but perhaps when we see it, inshallah, in English, we can also understand it as an example, and we'll conclude there. I said to him the ayah in Surah Al-An'am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا ذُكِرَ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ And what is wrong with you, O people, that you do not eat that which has been slaughtered with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَقَدْ فَصَّلَ لَكُمْ مَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala فَصَّلَ, He had made it 100% clear and distinguished for you that which is haram and that which is halal. I said to him, Surah Al-An'am, I said to him, Shaykh, generally when we look at the verses pertaining to Mecca and Medina, many of us will also know, the Meccan surah, they have certain characteristics. And the Madani surah, they have certain characteristics. This is when he was teaching this specific surah, Surah Al-An'am. I said to him, one of the characteristics is that rulings are normally mentioned in Mecca or Medina. Medina, generally. I said to him, Surah Al-An'am, generally, when you look at the theme that's been spoken about, it's talking about what? The Hujjajullah, the Hujjaj of Allah for Tawheed. Arguments. It's mainly speaking about Tawheed. So the surah, when you look at it, it's generally a Meccan or Madani surah. It's a Meccan surah. So I said to him, if this verse was sent down in Mecca, which it is by the way, I asked him and said, there's something I don't understand, because by the way, he's explaining this in the Dars. Surah Al-An'am, Surah Makkiyah, he goes through the verses, it was sent down for this reason, etc. I asked him whilst we were traveling, I said, Sheikh, you mentioned that the surah is a Meccan surah, but it's speaking about what? It's speaking about a ruling. And I said to him, if the surah was sent down in Mecca, and this verse is a Meccan ayah as well, I said to him, what doesn't add up for me is, we haven't even got to the time where the ahkam, tafsil of it happened in Medina. وَقَدْ فَصَّلَ لَكُمْ. Where's the tafsil? We're still in Mecca. Do you guys understand the question or not? Who doesn't understand the question? Huh? I'll say it one more time, but quicker inshallah. Surah An'am is speaking about things to do with Mecca. The Akhirah, it's speaking about angels, Iman, it's speaking about Tawheed. This verse here was also sent down in Mecca, the Shaykh said, in the class. But the characteristics of surahs that are Meccan, this one doesn't fit it. Because it's a surah, this is an ayah which is speaking about ruling. Normally, tafsil of ahkam, what's halal and haram, takes place in Medina. So I said to him, Shaykh, you said this, that is a Meccan ayah / surah. So how comes Allah said, وَقَدْ فَصَّلَ لَكُمْ? Where's the tafsil? The tafsil is coming later in Medina. The ahkam haven't been mentioned like that in Mecca yet. In fact, Allah said, وَقَدْ as well. And فَصَّلَ, it had been already explained to you. Within half a second, he said, no, stop, Abdulahad. He said, this is speaking about the future. Allah has given a glad tidings to the Prophet ﷺ, saying a time will come where tafsir of ahkam will happen, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala followed, is a bishara. And that's what I said, how did he so fast, quickly get that? If you look at purely that language, for someone who might not know the language very well, it's a shubha that someone can say to you. If you go speaker's corner, it's a shubha. He'll say to you, this is a Meccan surah, it's a Meccan ayah, then where's the tafsil of the ayat? What's the Quran speaking about? It's the example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times in the Quran who use a past tense verb but speaking about the future tense. For example, أَتَى أَمْرُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُوهُ. The command, the matter of Allah has come, so don't hasten for it. Which is talking about the hour, the day of resurrection. They don't ask for the hour. Ata, it has come. The hour hasn't come. But it's speaking about something for the future because of the 100% wuqu' of it. Guarantee that it will take place. Anyway, that's just an example, inshallah ta'ala. There's many other examples. I can mention many, many more. But that was an example. I'll conclude, inshallah ta'ala, by saying, if there's anything we have taken today, my message and the biggest benefit that I could perhaps say is, brothers, knowledge is something virtuous. Yes, Knowledge is the best thing after the compulsory acts that someone can busy themselves with. Yes. But let's not forget the reason why we are seeking the knowledge. Wallahi, for you to know the basics of your religion, for you to know 100 ahadith, but they change you as a human being, and you become a practical manifestation, and the taqwa of Allah is seen from you, is better for you compared to someone who increases the evidences Allah can have against it. The scholars, they say, لِمَ تُكَثِّرُ حُجَجَ اللَّهِ عَلَى نَفْسِكَ. Why would you increase the evidences Allah can have against you on the day of resurrection? We should be a people who we learn something, it should be seen within us. Your brother is sick, you should go visit him. You should implement a hadith of visiting the graves. You should implement the hadith of tawadu'. You should implement the hadith of sickness in your heart. The sunan. Knowledge is a means, not an ultimate goal. That's the last message, inshaAllah ta'ala, which is the best thing I could perhaps think of that I had come across during the time that I had been there. Barakallahu feekum, subhanakallahumma hamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.